to the launch of Leading with Gravitas edition 2. So the first edition came out 5 years ago, and there are a few people in this Zoom room who were at the first launch. So it's amazing to have you here with me. And before we start though, I'm going to do a few of the usual housekeeping things. And as you've just heard, the meeting is being recorded. And so if you would rather not be on the recording, then you're very welcome to have your camera switched off. If you are happy to be part of this, so I can see your lovely faces, I would equally love to have you switch your camera on. That's completely fine. I'm going to be incorporating a couple of Q&A sessions as part of the talk. And what we're going to do is you've got different options. You can either put your questions in chat, or when we come to the Q&A, you can raise your virtual hand, or you can raise your actual hand if you want to. And my good friend Jackie is going to moderate those two Q&A sessions. I would love you to help me spread the Gravitas word. And as you know, it's all about the socials. And so if you're into that kind of thing, I would love it if you were able to share an image of today, or even a picture of the book if you've got it already, and a quote or a key insight from today that you found interesting or useful. Pop it on social media, add the hashtag Leading with Gravitas. And there will be a prize. There'll be a selection of different prizes, including a place on my next Gravitas masterclass, which I know a number of you have attended over the years, and copies of the book. So please do help share the love and spread the word when it comes to Gravitas. All right, so let's get started. So the focus of today's session is all around change. And how does Gravitas relate to this word? Change. And the interesting thing about change is that it is happening all the time. And there are two different types of change. There's change that is forced upon us, so it's not in our control and we're reacting to it. And then there is change that is forged by us. And so we're proactively making that change happen. The past 18 months or so have been such a massive time of change for all of us, haven't they? We would never have imagined 18 months ago that we would be where we are now. And in the same way as past generations will remember where they were and what they were doing when Kennedy was shot, or where they were and what they were doing when the Twin Towers were hit, we will all remember our final moments of normality, our last moments of how things were before we realized that things wouldn't be the same again. And this is an image that represents my final moments of normality before it all changed. And it was the 13th of March, and I remember it so well. And I was standing at this station, this is London Bridge Station, and it was the end of a Gravitas masterclass that I delivered, my last live event since forever. And it had been a really weird day. My hands were really raw from all the industrial strength hand sanitizer that I've been pumping on my hands. And we'd had a really good day. So we had a group of people, and we were all focusing on how they could develop their Gravitas, but also how we could adapt the techniques that I was teaching them around face-to-face communication to the virtual world that they had already started to inhabit. And so, you know, those elbow bumps and the kind of distancing was just a really odd sensation. And as I stood there on the platform, and it was, I mean, this wasn't a photo that I took, this is a stock photo, but it was probably about 1911 as I stood there on that platform and looked up and down and across, and there was no one around. That sort of eerie silence and just that weird feeling. And I called up a friend who works at LinkedIn, and she said that they were closing their offices and no one was going to be going back until the following year. And I was like, wow, yeah, nothing is going to be the same. Nothing that we assumed was normal is going to be normal anymore. And so that was my moment, and you'll all have your own equivalent moments that you can relate to, your final moments before everything changed as a result of COVID. And since that moment, I remember just the variety of different emotions and pinballing around the change curve, from things like denial to anger to frustration to some confusion and depression. You know, we have all gone through each of those different places of the change curve to finally get into the point of acceptance and then back again. And I remember supporting the people that I work with, supporting my colleagues. And if you can make sure you put your mics on silent, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you. So I remember supporting the people around me and helping them sort of make that transition through the change curve, and just watching how COVID was affecting different people's businesses. So I had a number of friends and clients in hospitality whose businesses completely changed. People like musicians, performers, entertainers, speakers, facilitators, trainers, having to think, well, how are we going to do things differently now? And I personally, I remember I had a whole diary full of engagements that then suddenly just dropped out. And so it was thinking, well, how are we going to do things differently? And people who ran their own businesses thinking about how they were going to pivot. And so during all these deep changes, and of course the personal changes that we've all been through, we'll all have had to dig deep and really delve into how to make these changes work for us, how to forge our own way through the changes. And so in those times of change, in those times of turbulence, what we need when it comes to our leadership, whether we're being led or whether we are leading ourselves, the leadership qualities that are required are to be calm, to be credible, and to be in control. We need people who are going to be there. We need people who are going to take the situation seriously and forge a direction forward. And so gravitas is the quality, and my definition of gravitas is the ability to command respect, get taken seriously, and stand out from the crowd. And all of that by being yourself. Gravitas is really the key quality that people need when it comes through change, because you notice with people who have gravitas, you know, they have that sense of calmness and control and credibility. So why gravitas for me, you may be asking, and some of you will know the answer to this question because I answer this question in some of my talks and some of my masterclasses. That word gravitas is a very, very personal word for me. And I came across it in a personal way when I was 27 years old. And I remember it was appraisal time. And I was sitting there with my line manager at the time, Neil, and we were talking about, you know, how I was progressing. And he said, look, Antoinette, you're doing brilliantly. You know, you're doing all the things on the job description for you to progress. But the key thing that you need to do, is you need to work on your gravitas. And so I remember at the time thinking, oh, what's that then? You know, how am I supposed to go out and develop that? You know, what is it? Can I go buy it in a shop? Can I read a book? You know, how do I develop this thing called gravitas? Because it was clear that there was something missing from how I was showing up that was preventing me from progressing in my career. And so it was a challenging time, and I did end up getting promoted, and I did end up progressing and developing within my career until quite a few years later. And by this time I was running leadership development programs in corporate organizations. And I remember one particular day, and I was working at an investment bank, and 3 people came in, one coaching session after another. 3 people came in and they said, look, Antoinette, I'm being told I need to work on my gravitas. Do you have any idea how I develop it and what it is? And it took me back to that day when I was 27. And so that was really the sign that I needed. It's like it became really my calling to go out and find out what gravitas actually was and turn it into something that could be developed and accelerated in people. And so often I work with people who get given a piece of feedback, whether they need to have more confidence, or they need to specifically have more gravitas, or they need to have more impact and more executive presence. They get told that they need to do that, but they don't get told how to go about developing it for themselves. They don't get told that. And so that became my mission, to turn it into something that could be developed and progressed for people. And so I started out by thinking about the word itself. Now, the word gravitas is a very, very old-fashioned word. And it was traditionally, if you think about old school gravitas, it was traditionally associated with silver-haired gentlemen of a certain age whose gravitas has emerged like a fine wine over the years. And I remember at the time thinking, well, I'm clearly never going to be that. How am I going to develop it? How can we make it a quality that's relatable and realistic for everyone today? And so I thought, well, I won't go back to the statesman-like qualities. Let's go back to the source. And so I went back to the word itself and realized that, in fact, the word gravitas has got two different components to it. There's two different parts to it. The first part of the word gravitas is the word gravis. And the word gravis, for those people who've done Latin at school, the word gravis means weight. And while you're sitting there, and as you're sort of thinking about this word gravitas and the ability to command respect, get taken seriously, stand out from the crowd and lead through change, I want you to think about that word gravis, that word weight, and imagine the weight of your body going through down into the soles of your feet and connecting you to the ground and really pulling you down with the gravity that's always there. That sense of weight and gravitas is an incredible force that will ground you and keep you solid during changing times. So that's just the first part of the word gravitas, gravis, that sense of weight. The second part of the word gravitas, and you can connect with this whenever you want to connect with your own gravitas. The second part of the word gravitas is vita. And if you think about that V at the center, and if you look at the cover of the book, there's a V there. The word gravitas, it represents that word vita. Means life force, it means energy, and it means, yeah, the power that will propel you forward. And so the vita and the gravis, they in a way, they sound like quite opposing forces, because you've got the weight of gravis and you've got the energy of vita. But if you connect with both of those during times of change, when you're feeling like you could be knocked off course, you're going to be able to stay strong and stay powerful and keep forging ahead. So the word itself has got a huge amount of power to it. So that was a great start. But then I thought, well, look, we need to give people something a little bit more tangible if they're going to learn and develop it for themselves, which is when I came up with the Gravitas wheel, the model, the whole model which the Gravitas program is centered around. And I'm going to take you through that Gravitas wheel right now. So bear with me a second. So the Gravitas wheel has got 6 different components to it. And those people, I might start testing people who've been on my course, because you'll know this inside out, for the people who've read the book as well. The Gravitas wheel is this is about how you break down gravitas and make it something that can be measurable and acceleratable. So gravitas is divided, based on the research that I conducted, into 6 different components. There are 3 different components here which are internal to you. These are qualities that are on the inside that people may not necessarily see on the surface, but they will be the foundation of your gravitas. That will give you the weight. So there's self-awareness first. So when it comes to times of change, it's really important to understand where your strengths are when you're strong through change, but also how you might trip yourself up, what triggers you, How are you not at your best? What happens during change that can knock you off course, and what can you do about it? So self-awareness is the foundation of everything. Then there's expertise. So for people who have gravitas, their gravitas is underpinned by a real wealth of knowledge and information and experience. And so expertise is, it's really the building block of gravitas, but it's not enough to just have expertise. It's also about how do you express that expertise to others. Then there's authenticity, and I'm going to go into a bit more detail on authenticity a little bit later today. When it comes to gravitas, if you think about the leaders who you perceive as having gravitas, the ones you really believe, command, respect, and take seriously, especially during these turbulent times, they are the ones who are themselves. They show up, they're real, they're genuine, they're authentic. And we can tell when people have been fed a line or are being disingenuous or don't exactly believe what they're saying. We can tell that. And so authenticity is absolutely critical when it comes to gravitas. So those are the three internal components of gravitas. And then there are three external ones here. And this is how you evidence everything that's on the right-hand side to the outside world. So the first one is presence. And again, presence is quite intangible, but you know when someone has presence, and you don't know that they don't, because you don't notice them. So presence is really important, especially during change. And again, I'm going to go into quite a lot more detail on presence later on today. When we're going through change, especially uncertainty, and we're looking to our leaders, we need them to be there. And so we need leaders to be present during change, but also for us personally, if we want to progress and develop and we want to really fulfill our potential, then we need to be visible. We need to have impact, and we need to have that point of difference. And so presence is really important for a number of different reasons. Then there's connection. And I don't know about you, but one of the main reasons why I was able to change and pivot and grow through change is through the connections that I made and the people that I know, many of whom are here today. So connection is hugely important when it comes to change. The ability to build relationships, forge networks, and communicate effectively with other people is hugely important if you're wanting to develop your own gravitas and really build your profile. The final element of the gravitas wheel here is projection, and that's your ability to amplify your message and get your information across to the largest audiences. And so I'm projecting to you now. If I wasn't, you wouldn't be listening to me. So it's about how do you amplify, how do you turn up the gas, how do you make sure that you reach everyone, whether it's in a virtual environment or in a real one. And so we've got these 6 components of the gravitas wheel. And what we do on the program is, firstly, people can assess where they are against these 6 components. And actually, if you go onto my website later today or whenever, there's a gravitas profiling tool that enables you to assess yourself against each of those 6 components. So there's those 6 components, and then there is the word purpose at the center. Ultimately, people who have gravitas are driven by a sense of purpose. They want to make a difference. And this doesn't have to necessarily be purely about their role and their work, but there needs to be something outside of work where it's bigger than them and they want to, where they're making a difference in the wider sense. And so I'm going to press pause there for a second now that we've looked at why gravitas is such a crucial component when it comes to change, why it's so relevant. And now we've also looked at what gravitas is, the gravis and the vita, and we've looked at the gravitas wheel itself. I'm going to press pause to see if anyone's got any questions. Have any questions come in, Jackie?
Oh, well, Antoinette, you're doing such a great job of explaining it all. I've just put a reminder in the chat of the different ways people can ask questions, but something occurred to me. You were talking earlier on about the original perception of gravitas might be the sort of distinguished, perhaps more elderly gentleman. Is there a difference, do you think, then, between gravitas for men and for women?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And it's one that I'm asked quite often. And Yeah, the traditional perception of gravitas was the silver-haired gentleman. It was a statesman-like quality back in Roman times. And so what has often happened with people who want to develop more gravitas, whether they're men or women, is they've been told that they need to deepen their voice. And, you know, women might have been told that they need to dress in a more masculine way. And so I think, you know, that gets in the way of authenticity though. And so the way I work is certainly, you know, I will help everyone, men, women, whoever they are, however they identify, to use their communication skills non-verbally as well as verbally. So the words that they use, but also their body language and what they do with their voice. But it's about how do you do that in such a way that it's authentic. And so my take on it is gravitas is unique and individual to every single person. So there isn't like a female version of it and a male version of it. It's up to you and how you use each of those 6 different components of the wheel to develop your own version of it and ensure that's seen.
Oh, that's an interesting point, isn't it? We are all different. On another of those sort of parallels, what about introverts and extroverts? Do they exhibit gravitas in different ways?
Yeah, so it's interesting with people who are on either end of that spectrum, introverted and extroverted. And what I often find is with the gravitas wheel, people who are more introverted are stronger generally on the right-hand side of the wheel. So they have greater self-awareness, they're clearer on their expertise, and perhaps they've spent more time thinking about and reflecting on who they want to be authentically, and it's a really important value for them. So that tends to be where people who are more introverted feel comfortable, and they feel less comfortable on the presence and projection and connection, and vice versa with people who are more extroverted. They're really happy having the presence and projecting. You know, they love being around people. That's where they get their energy. But perhaps they haven't spent as much time thinking about really what their expertise is and really reflecting, you know, how they want to differentiate themselves and maybe becoming more aware of how they show up and how to flex. And so, yeah, it absolutely isn't the case that someone who's more introverted or more extroverted is more likely to have gravitas or not.
And going off script a little bit, what's the story of the book then? How did the first edition came about, and what about the second edition that's launching now?
So the first edition, I remember I was saying about, you know, having had that feedback when I was 27, that word staying in my brain, kind of always musing around, what is this magical thing? And then when I had that those 3 coaching sessions where the 3 people came in and said, you know, what's gravitas and can you help me develop it? It's at that point I decided to write the book. And so I went out and did the research and put the model together and piloted it, and then honed it and refined it. And the first book took 3 years to write. You know, my family were a lot smaller at the time. I think they would have been, yeah, really quite young. I remember my youngest daughter popping up from underneath the table at the first launch at the Covent Garden Hotel. Anyway, I'm reminiscing. So that was the first launch. That was 5 years ago. And then I thought, over this past year, I thought, well, one of the things that I certainly can do with the time I've got now that we're all in lockdown is to create an updated version of it. Because I realized that what the book didn't include was a whole load of content which people needed around virtual communication. You know, how do I lead? How do I communicate through a 2D screen? And so that's really what I did in terms of the second edition, is to update it. And then I added a whole chapter on the end around leading through change, which is the main focus of what today is.
I love the thoughtfulness that you put into your research and the building of the book in the first place. And I can see just behind your left ear a quote from Facebook saying it's a must read for every leader.
Yeah.
If it's good enough for Facebook, it's good enough for the rest of us.
Oh, yeah, that was lovely. Yeah, really, really lovely of Shruti to give me that quote. So, yeah, so it's had some amazing feedback already since the launch, and I look forward to hearing everyone's views on it, because I know quite a few people have already got hold of their copies. So let's move on, because I want to make sure we focus on two of the key components when it comes to Gravitas, particularly during change, and that's authenticity and presence. So the first one, authenticity, and how does that relate to Gravitas? Well, as I said before, during change particularly, we need to believe the leaders who we are being led by, ideally. And you can tell when someone's being disingenuous. You can tell when they're trying to be something that they're not, or they're communicating a message that they don't believe in. And so if we're going to trust people, and if you want your people to trust you, it's really important for you to be able to show up with authenticity, whether that you work within a corporate organization or whether you run your own business. And it might on the surface seem like a really easy thing to do, you know, oh yeah, just be yourself. And people often get told, oh yeah, just be yourself. But it's not often as simple as that. And I certainly remember when I was progressing through my career, when I worked in PR, having a huge amount of pressure to conform to the people who are around me. And I think what a lot of people do when they join an organization is they think, well, look, what do I need to do to progress and develop? And they look at the most senior person, or they, you know, if they're running a business, they look at the people who are doing it successfully and they think, well, look, I need to be like that. I'm going to emulate that. So then before you know it, is you have a whole group of people who are all looking the same, talking the same, sounding the same, and organizations can turn into clones. And this is changing, which is fantastic, with the emphasis on diversity and inclusion. This is changing a lot, but there is still that pressure to conform, and social media can compound that. You know, for all of us, I don't think any of us is immune to when you're scrolling through social media and you see these beautifully polished images of people and you think, you know, I want to be like that. How can I be like that? And so authenticity is a tough one to crack. How do you think about developing your authenticity? It feels like a bit of a contradiction in terms. Is how can I be more authentic? Ultimately, there's a big link between authenticity and self-awareness. And so if you spend time reflecting on who you are, where you've come from, where you're going, what's important to you, what are you passionate about, what do you love, you know, what fires you up, that gives you a huge amount of data and clues around what your values are and who you are as a person and who you want to be and how you want to be. And so reflection and self-awareness are hugely important when it comes to authenticity. But it doesn't stop there, because I don't know about you, but I've certainly worked with and known quite a few leaders who are authentically crashing around, being inappropriate, upsetting people left, right, and centre. And they're like, oh, just being authentic. I'm just being me, you know, take it or leave it. And frankly, often people will leave it. And so authenticity is also about being appropriate to the environment that you're in. And I think everything is changing. If you think about the use of pronouns in the workplace, if you think about you know, the words that we would have used to describe different groups within society only a few months ago, actually, this is changing all the time. And so to be appropriate and authentic in the environments that we're in requires an element of adaptability and evolution. And so when it comes to authenticity, it's also about being prepared to continue to develop. And this word, imposter syndrome, I'm just going to put it out there now, because it just comes up all the time. And people think, oh, imposter syndrome. It's like, oh my God, I feel like the imposter. And it's like it's the second pandemic of the 21st century. You know, everyone has got it in different ways, and people think that it's a really bad thing. But imposter syndrome, that feeling that perhaps you don't quite belong, or maybe you're not quite ready, or someone's going to come and like tap you on the shoulder and tell you need to go, that feeling that probably resonates for everyone here, actually is a sign that you are progressing and developing, and you're putting yourself out of your comfort zone. And of course, if you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you are going to feel an element of imposter. You might feel slightly inauthentic, but it's still part of your development and growth and progression. And this is about becoming comfortable with being outside of your comfort zone, making friends with your imposter, and allowing your authentic self to develop. So that's part of authenticity. The other part of authenticity is about flexibility and being appropriate to the different people that you meet and the different environments that you're in, and really becoming attuned to the ability to flex and change. And in my programs, I talk about the concept of managed authenticity, which might sound like a bit of a contradiction in terms. But what I mean by that is that in different circumstances, you will be wearing different hats. And especially when you're communicating and leading through change, at times you'll want to wear a visionary hat where you're really rallying people around a future goal. There'll be other times where you want to wear the peacekeeper's hat, where you're kind of making sure that everyone is working together. Maybe you might wear the morale booster hat or the coach's hat. And so you'll be wearing different hats at different times. You will still be authentically you though. And so when it comes to authenticity, when it comes to leading through change and having gravitas, it's about really thinking about that flexibility of how you want to show up. So that's authenticity. We're going to move on to presence now. And after that, I'll stop again. If anyone's got any questions, then please put them in chat or be ready to share them verbally. And so presence. Now, the thing is about presence is, you know, when someone has presence because you notice them, and you don't know that they don't because you don't notice them. And so one of the key ways of eliminating presence altogether is by not having your camera switched on when you're communicating in a virtual environment, for example. Now, why is presence important and relevant here, especially during change? I was talking with a friend of mine who coaches senior head teachers in schools, and she was saying that her teachers clearly have been through a huge amount over the last 18 months as they've been managing all the changes through the schools and trying to keep teachers and pupils safe and pointing in the right direction. And she said that quite a lot of head teachers are hunkering down, hiding in their offices, focusing in on the admin stuff, the peak flow tests, and how do you kind of process, and they are ceasing to go out and actually communicate with the pupils and the teachers. They're ceasing to have a presence, and they don't necessarily realize the impact that that has. And so I think this is a useful example, because often when we're going through change, especially the introverts, we'll go and hide, we'll hunker down, we'll kind of bury our head in the sand and, try and figure out ourselves, and we don't go out and communicate. We need people to be visible. We need people to be more visible than ever before during change. And so if you're leading change yourself, whether it's for your teams, for your organizations, for your friends and family, or simply for yourself, it's about being present and being visible. So presence is about, it's about being present, it's about being there, but it's also about different things that you can do with your mindset, your body language, your voice to be noticed. And so I want to share this table with you, because this is quite an interesting comparison between when someone has presence and when they don't. And so if you're nervous and distracted and stressed and tired and thinking about what you're going to have for dinner or how many emails have come in the last hour or so, you will not have presence. Okay, so you need to think about, how do you keep your mindset nice and calm and uncluttered if you really want to have presence. With your body language, if you're if you're feeling sluggish or uncomfortable, or if you're folded in, or you're in pain in some way, you won't have presence. And so people with presence, you notice them because they're at ease, they're energized, they've got that vita going on. So posture is going to be really important when it comes to presence. Think about your voice. And so if I were to be speaking with you like this in a monotone way, and I was communicating how important change was and gravitas and if I was just doing it in a monotonous, flat way, you would not get entertained. Listen to people on the radio and how they communicate, and how you can bring variety and color and tone and pace and pausing into communication. All of this will give you greater presence. Think about what you do with your eyes. And so if your eyes are all over the place, and if you're looking away, and if you're kind of looking down and you don't feel like you can look someone in the eye, if you're communicating virtually and you're looking down here, that's going to be quite different from if you're actually communicating to the camera. So your eyes are going to give you presence or not. And then finally, your image, what you choose to wear. And I'm not going to dictate, but if you want to be noticed and have visibility and stand out from the crowd, then think about how your visual impact is going to either enhance or detract from that. So all of this is about presence and how you can develop your own. And all of this is a choice. This is the point. You can choose to have presence, and you can choose to increase it or decrease it. So I use the analogy of a flame. Sometimes actually you might want to have quite a low presence and not be noticed, and let other people take the limelight and let other people speak. And so sometimes you might want to kind of decrease your flame of presence. And other times you're going to want to really turn up the gas and maximize your presence and impact so that you truly get noticed and have that impact. And so presence is really important. And this is about thinking about, well, what fires you up? What switches you on? What lights you up? How can you choose to focus on that? But also make sure that when you're with other people, what lights them up as well? What can you give them in what you say to them that's going to really make them shine? And so that was a deeper dive on authenticity and on presence. And again, I'm just going to press pause a sec on the content and see if there are any other questions before I go with a final piece of content.
Thank you, Antoinette. You're obviously so immersed in this world of Gravitas and have a wealth of insight to share. We've got some questions. This one is asking for your advice about how do you pull yourself into a place of impact when you're experiencing a time of doubt, or you're being derailed by an alpha male type character?
Ooh, okay. All right, so there's two parts to that question, aren't there? So how do you immerse yourself in having impact? Firstly, well, it's a choice to choose to do that, to choose to switch it on. And you could spend all your time preparing, thinking about what's the worst that could happen and how stressed you are by this alpha male, and all the different times where this alpha male maybe minimized you, made you feel small. You could go into a total vortex of doom thinking about all of this stuff from the mindset perspective. And you can imagine how you're then going to show up. You're going to be self-deprecating, you're going to be looking down, you're going to be probably twiddling around with your hair or maybe your jewelry, feeling nervous. You're going to communicate all those subtle tells that shows that person that you're not feeling comfortable. And so if we look at it through the frame of gravitas, use your self-awareness to think about the expertise that you bring, the value that you bring to that interaction. What do you have that other person doesn't have? And really use that to boost your own gravitas and your own confidence. And then be prepared in advance around how you communicate and what you want to say. If in the moment you still get derailed, then what I recommend is it's called the power pause, and it's really, really valuable. And what the power pause does is it puts you back in control. So imagine that someone has done something or said something that threatens to kind of like knock you off course. You're like, whoa, that was woof. and you find yourself going into fight or flight. And so you will feel that in your body. You'll feel yourself getting tense. Maybe you get a little bit of palpitation. You might like your jaw might start tense up, and your heart might start going like this. And you might also notice it in your head as well, where the voice in your head starts going, oh, it's happened again. He said that thing. That's so patronizing. Oh my God, I feel completely out of control. You're in fight or flight at that moment. So what you've got to do is you've got to do something to break it. So the first step in the power pause is to notice that it's happened. Notice that you've been triggered. The second step after that, and this is so powerful, is to do what I've just done. Take a breath. And it doesn't need to take hours. You don't need to say, hang on a minute, everybody, I'm just taking a breath. You just take a breath, because what that does is it interrupts the fight or flight as well. So it interrupts what might be going on in your head and in your body. That's the second step. Third step is to label how you're feeling. So again, this brings the attention back into your mind and brings you back into a place of control. So you might label the feeling of being sidetracked, or what was the word that they used, Jackie?
Derailed.
I'm feeling derailed right now. So you label it, and then you think, actually, so that's the third step. Then you think, well, how do I want to be feeling? Do I want to be feeling derailed, or do I want to be feeling something else instead? So what would be a different emotion that would be more powerful? What do you think, Jackie?
Oh, well, it's actually such practical advice. And I'm thinking your answer about the power pause will deal with Erica's question as well, which is parallel. How do you continue to have impact and turn up your own flame if you want to turn your flame down?
Okay.
So it comes back to all your keys to gravitas, I think.
Yes. And so once you've labeled, you felt derailed, then you think, well, actually, I don't want to feel derailed. So the next step after that is, how do I want to be feeling? So you might think, I want to be feeling calm, or I might want to be feeling in control. And so can you hear how when you give your brain that command, it will then enable you to regain that control, which will then lead you to the final step, which is...
And being on the same analogy and being a wordsmith, instead of being derailed, you might decide you want to feel on track. Remind yourself what is your track and just get back on it.
Exactly. And so the power pause is a really valuable tool if you felt like you've been derailed for whatever reason, but also if you get those moments of anxiety. And I certainly have had moments of anxiety these last 18 months where I've like, oof, you kind of feel, that slight feeling of not being in control. And I have therefore applied the power pause to those situations as well as those other situations where I've been triggered. And so to Erica's question around the flame, what was it again? How do you turn it up and how do you turn it down?
How do you turn up your flame when someone else is trying to turn it down for you?
Okay, right.
And we've got a couple more as well, if you've got time for them.
Okay, all right. So if someone is trying to turn it down for you, so that there's an interesting belief going on there that someone is actively trying to switch you off or turn you down. And again, if you choose to believe that that's the case, that's going to disempower you. And so then the key thing with this is to take the personality thing out of it. Don't take things personally and think objectively about what's happened, what's been said, and don't feel like it's a personal attack to you. And then you can say, so depending on what they've said, you can literally reflect it back and say, oh, okay, so you disagree with what I've just said. In what way do you disagree? So you bat it back. By doing that, by batting it back to them, it shows them that you're not prepared to be trodden on, but it also keeps the conversation going and keeps you feeling in control. So that's one way of helping keeping your flame burning brightly, even in the face of what might feel like, aggressive behavior.
Let's go for some 3 super speedy, quick fire questions that maybe you can answer in more detail in a blog post or follow-up video or something. First one, how do you maximize or approach your gravitas when you're moving into a new environment with new stakeholders, such as a new job? How do you establish your gravitas as a new person?
Yeah, I'm working with so many people who are exactly in that position right now. And I can see there is a number of people in this room who I've worked with who have been in that position as well. So what can you do? Well, it's about preparation. It's about thinking, well, you got the job for a reason, for a start. So increase your self-awareness around specifically what it was that meant that they chose you over and above other people. Then think about when it comes, so that's the self-awareness element of the Gravitas wheel. Then when it comes to expertise, get really clear on the expertise that you bring, so that people, if people ask you, oh, who are you? What do you do? Where have you come from? You've got a really valuable answer to give that reflects you at your best. So I talk about a rocket pitch, which is not like a sort of formulaic elevator pitch. It's an example. It's an illustration of you delivering your expertise that's going to be relevant to the person that you're talking to. And so preparation before you go in and take on that new role is going to be absolutely key. And if you focus on the self-awareness and the expertise, then that in itself is going to enable you to have presence. Other things, I'm working with someone at the moment. She's about to start a new role and she wants to go in there and absolutely smash it. And so what we've done, and it shouldn't only be about this, and it isn't only about this, but she's gone out and she's got herself some new clothes that indicate that she's at the level that she is. And I remember absolutely doing this when I went into a senior position. I got myself some new clothes that said senior, and it really helped as I went in. Perfume again, do whatever it is that you love. Play music that makes you feel fabulous, do all the things that make you feel brilliant, so that when you stride into that building or switch on that camera for your first day, you are going to smash it because you know you're ready.
And that sounds as though some of those wise words might help with the next question from Layla. How do you prepare for a challenging meeting in which you might be derailed?
Oh, another derail question.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for a challenging meeting? Well, that's about, okay, I'm going to take you through this really, really quickly. This is about doing the preparation in advance so that you can mitigate anything that might derail you. So firstly, and I've created an acronym, and this is in the book as well. And the acronym is OPRAS. And whenever I share this with people, for those people who have used this, it's good, isn't it? It works. Yeah, I can see you nodding. So OPRAS stands for, O is objective. Think, in this meeting, what is my objective? What do I want to achieve? P stands for people. Who are the other people in the meeting? What are their objectives and what do they want to achieve? Because if you start thinking about them, you're going to immediately start tailoring your style. So that's P. R stands for role. What role am I having in this meeting? Am I going to be a visionary? Am I going to be a strategist? And am I going to be a creative? Am I going to be a facilitator? Am I going to be a coach? What role are you going to play? Am I going to be an expert? Because again, so remember those hats. The minute you think I'm going to be an expert, it changes everything about how you show up. So that's the R of OPRAS. The A of OPRAS stands for attitude. So what attitude am I going to go in there with? So you might go in there with the attitude of positivity. You might go in there with the attitude of concern, because that might be the most appropriate attitude. You might go in there with the attitude of being conciliatory or being open, or you might go in with the attitude of caution, if you feel like it might be a difficult meeting. The H of OPRAS stands for hear. What am I going to hear? And so this is a great way of helping you become really curious about what's going on and tuning into and listening to what they're saying, so that you can then tailor what the S stands for at the end of Oprah's, which is what am I going to say. Usually, if people do any kind of preparation for any sort of meeting, all they think about is what I'm going to say. And if you haven't done the other thinking before, and they say something or do something that like knocks you off, then what you would have prepared to say won't land. And you'll get derailed. So Oprah's is a really useful planning tool for all sorts of different situations. I'm conscious of time, so there probably are some other questions that have come through. Really happy to pick up after 2 o'clock today, or one-to-one, or equally, write a blog post or put a video out. But I want to really make sure that before I do this final section, there are some thank yous that I want to share. And there have been some amazing people who have helped me with the whole Gravitas journey along the way, and some of them have been here since the very beginning. Laura, I remember you helping me read the first one 5 years ago. So I've got some thank yous. Firstly, this fabulous book, the publishers, Layla Green and Ali Juji, who run the publishing house Known. They published both this book for me and also Power Up as well. And I couldn't recommend them more strongly enough. Thank you so much, Layla, for everything. As always, I just love working with you. You're a total star. So that's Layla. And then I want to say thank you to Artie Pamar, who designed this cover. And just to explain what this is all about, I use the analogy of a diamond when it comes to Gravitas. And this is all about, you could be the most incredible person in the whole wide world. You could be the greatest expert in what you do. But unless you actually shine, it's like you're a black rock underneath the surface of the earth, unless you are able to express who you are and your expertise and shine and share it with others, that is when you become a diamond. And so this represents the diamond that underpins a lot of the work that I do in the program. So thank you so much, Artie, for the design of this. She also designed Power Up as well. She's a fabulous brand specialist, strongly recommend. And also I want to say thank you to Lika Kvirikashvili, all the way from Georgia. And she is the illustrator for all the beautiful images in the book as well. So thank you so much to Kavika. I will let you peruse the images in your own time, because at the moment I can't find any of them. So anyway, thank you so much, Lika. You're a total diamond and star. I'd like to say thank you so much to my husband, Steve, who is dialing in from the room next door. Thank you so much for your support all the way through. And to my dad, who always supported me all the way through as well. And the book is dedicated to Steve and to my dad. So thank you so much to them. So to round off, we've done a whistle-stop tour around what Gravitas is, the Gravitas wheel, those 6 different components, and a deep dive onto authenticity and presence and how you can use it to lead yourself, your teams, your businesses through change. The thing is, in terms of what next, who knows where the future lies? Who knows what changes are afoot? It's changing all the time, isn't it? But things are getting better. And so the world is starting to get back to normal. The shops are busy again. We're finally able to sit inside restaurants and bars, and those train platforms are filling up again. And so things are starting to evolve slowly. And despite that, though, our physical world is still quite small, isn't it? If you compare to what we would have been doing traveling around last year, our physical world is quite small, but our virtual world is limitless. And so as you continue to navigate all the changes that will either be forced upon you or creating and forging those changes for yourself, I want you to have a goal, have a vision, be clear about what your purpose and where you're going, but more importantly, be content and satisfied at an authentic level with who you are right now. And then at a presence level, be happy and content with where you are in the present day. You know, focus and be grateful for what you have, and pay attention to what's going on in the here and now, because it's so easy for us to miss all the great things that we're surrounded by. And when it comes to self-development, when it comes to self-actualization and fulfilling your purpose and all of those things, you know, it can be a little bit like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that, you know, you're constantly striving for that pot of gold. But the point is, with any of this self-development stuff, it's always developing, it's always progressing. We will never get there. And so it's not actually about hankering and seeking the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. What it actually is about is enjoying the journey, enjoying the multitude of different colors that are in the rainbow itself, which feels like a really powerful and relevant message to end on, given it's Pride Month this month. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rainbow, continue to sparkle like the diamonds that you are. Let me know what you think about the book. And if you'd like to get hold of a copy of it, you can get it on my website. But most importantly, thank you so much for coming, and go forth and be fabulous. All right, nice to see you. Thank you so much for the lovely, lovely messages. And there is a recording of this. I will be sharing it on my YouTube channel, so you can share it with other people as well. And if you've got any other questions, like I say, I'm here, you know, ready to take them now. Or if you want to ask me any questions, that you can always contact me directly as well. Please do. I'm sure you will be connected with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the other socials. Stay in touch.